How are you guys doing? Today is Wednesday, September 1st, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I plan on doing an elite individual profile on Calais Campbell. The elite defensive end for the Baltimore Orioles turns 35 today, and my intention with this episode is to try to point a little towards the accolades, the achievements, and what he's been able to accomplish from the moment he stepped foot on the football field, at least at Miami or before, to where he is now, to get a sense of just like how dynamic and amazing and respected of a football player he is, for a player to be turning 35 and to still be on this list in a very competitive league in the NFL, or like the NFL, in a competitive sport like football. If you're unfamiliar with Calais Campbell, I listed his nickname as the Mountain on this because he's 6'8". He's ridiculous. He's 6'8" and 300 pounds. The fact that offensive linemen regularly stop him and keep him from getting sacks in a game is a marvel in itself. But of course, using his one in a million physique, he does have the skill, he does have the mental acuity to actually be able to predict what offenses are doing. He is a menace in the backfield, and I would imagine it's pretty tough to wield all that power, strength, and speed and kind of really master it. But the fact that Calais Campbell makes it look effortless should just say what it means to be that good. So he's originally from Denver, Colorado, to give a little bit of background. He would go on to play at the University of Miami for his first 3 seasons. As a freshman, he would go on to play 11 games in 2005 for a Miami team that would go 9-3 under Larry Coker. They would end up losing the Peach Bowl that year to LSU. They ended up getting destroyed, but they had a pretty good season that year. In his freshman season, Calais Campbell would go on to finish with 24 tackles in the 11 games he played, 6 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, and 3 passes defended. 2005, not much came of that season, but he would come back for his second season, his sophomore season, and his sophomore season was the season that stuck out to many or at least in the ACC. In his sophomore season at Miami, he would go on to play 13 games in what would be Larry Coker's last season with the team. They ended up going 7-6. They would go up ending the 2006 MPC Computers Bowl against Nevada. But in that season, Calais Campbell would go on to finish with 55 tackles on the season, 30 more than he did his freshman year. He would finish with 20.5 tackles for loss, which is 14.5 more than his freshman year. He had 10.5 sacks, which is 8 more than he did his freshman year as well, along with 4 passes defended. He had 3 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery. The only time in college he was actually dealing with fumbles. In 2006, he would go on to be named to the first team All-ACC, and following that year, he would come back to Miami because, of course, you can't get drafted as a sophomore. In his junior season in 2007, he would go on to play 12 games in Randy Shannon's first season with Miami. They would go 5-7 and completely missed the bowl game. But in his senior season, Calais Campbell would finish with about 50 tackles on the year, 5 less than his sophomore season. He had 12.5 tackles for loss, second straight double-digit season with double-digit tackles for loss. He also had 6.5 sacks. He would go on to record the only interception of his college career as well in his junior season. And following his 3 years of college, he established himself as a good enough prospect to be taken in the second round of the 2008 draft. He was taken with the 50th overall pick to play with the Arizona Cardinals. But just looking at the players to come out of that round, just like even active, like Matt Ryan was the 3rd overall pick in the 2008 draft. Joe Flacco, the 18th, Aqib Talib, the 20th, Chris Johnson, the 24th. Just to get a sense, like a lot of these players aren't playing anymore. Jordy Nelson was selected ahead of him with the 36th pick. Matt Forte was 44th. And the pick right before him was Deshaun Jackson from Cal to the Eagles, to give a sense of just like the context of the 2008 NFL draft and the people that came in with him the same year that he did. And it looks as though the only player that's still on this list that was drafted above him was Matt Ryan, and he was the third overall pick in that draft. But like I said, he would go on to be taken by the Arizona Cardinals. And once he was taken by the Cardinals, he would start to cement his legacy. In 2008, he would not start a single game, but he would start in all 16 of the games that the Cardinals played in the season where they would go on to win the NFC West with a 9-7 record. In Calais Campbell's rookie season, he would go on to finish with 29 tackles. He also finished with a forced fumble on the season as well as a pass defended. He wouldn't get any rookie recognition, but the Arizona Cardinals that year he would get the furthest in the playoffs he would ever go in his entire career. They would beat the Falcons in the wild card round by 6 to go into the next round. This is also the year where Kurt Warner won the Walter Payton Man of the Year in Ken Whisenhunt's second year. In the second round, they beat the Panthers by 20. In the NFC Championship game, they ended up beating the Eagles by a full touchdown before they ended up losing in the Super Bowl to the Steelers. And this was Ben Roethlisberger's, I believe, second Super Bowl, this was Ben Roethlisberger's second Super Bowl with the team. Very big win this was the year where Troy Polamalu went up against Larry Fitzgerald and they ended up on the Madden cover, but that was the context. That was the farthest that Calais Campbell got in the playoffs. But after falling short to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Calais Campbell would eventually get called up as a full-time starter in 2009 for his second full season with the Arizona Cardinals. In his age 23 season in 2009, he started 15 of the 16 games that he would play in a season where the Arizona Cardinals finished with a 10-6 record. They finished with one win more than they had won the season where they had made it all the way to the Super Bowl. Campbell would finish with 47 tackles on the season, 18 more than his rookie season. He finished with 8 tackles for loss, which quadrupled what he did the previous year. He had 7 sacks, which is 7 more than he had his rookie season. He had 5 passes defended, as well as a forced fumble as well. Once the Arizona Cardinals made the playoffs in 2009, they would beat the Cardinals 51-45 in overtime before getting housed by the Saints in 2009, and that was the year when the Saints would go on to beat the Colts in the Super Bowl. Following that season, they would experience a bit of a playoff drought. In Calais Campbell's third NFL season, his age 24 season in 2010, he would start all 15 of the games that he would play in a season where the Cardinals would go 5-11. They missed the playoffs for the first time since he had been there. And in this season, Calais Campbell would finish with 60 tackles on the season, which then was a career high for him. He would finish with 13 tackles for losses, the first time he finished with double-digit tackles for loss. He also defended a couple of passes, and he would recover his first fumble in his career. And like I said, following that season, they would not make the playoffs, which would set the stage for his age 25 season in 2011. This would be the first season where he started 16 games in an NFL season. In that season, he started all 16 games for a Cardinals team that went 8-8. They won 3 more games in the previous season, but they still went on to miss the playoffs. In this season, Calais Campbell would finish with 72 tackles. This would be tied for the most tackles he's ever put up in a season. He would go on to finish with 10 passes defended for the only time he'd ever do so in his career, as well as an interception. He had 2 forced fumbles, the first time he had multiple forced fumbles in a season, as well as a fumble recovery. He would go on to finish with 8 sacks, which is the most sacks he had put up in his career. Not to mention he finished with 13 tackles for loss for the second straight year. And after the Cardinals missed the playoffs, Calais Campbell will come back to Arizona for his 5th season in the NFL. In 2012, his age 26 season, he would start 12 of the 13 games he would play for an Arizona Cardinals team that would end up going 5-11 for the second time that he was there under Ken Whisenhunt. This would be Ken Whisenhunt's last season as Cardinals head coach. But in 2012, in his age 26 season, Calais Campbell would finish, even though he would play 3 less games, he finished with 63 tackles, 9 less tackles than he had the year before. He would go on to finish with 13 tackles for loss, the same amount of tackles for loss he had the last couple of seasons. He had 6.5 sacks, 1.5 sack less than he did the previous season, and he also had 6 passes defended. At the end of the day, the Cardinals would not make the playoffs But once again, Calais Campbell would come back to the Cardinals for what would be his 6th season with the team, his age 27 season in 2013, and this would be the 2nd season where he started all 16 games. In this season where he started all 16 games, the Arizona Cardinals would finish with a 10-6 record, the 3rd best record in their division, and they would go on to miss the playoffs. But in this season, Campbell would go on to finish with 58 total tackles on the season. He would finish with 9 sacks on the year, the most sacks he ever put together in a season up until that point. Same with tackles for loss, as he had 14. He would record his first safety of his NFL career as well, just to give a sense of what he was, just to show what he was doing flying around the ball. And like I said, at the conclusion of the season, the Cardinals would go on to miss the playoffs. But following that, Calais Campbell would come back for his age 28 season in 2014. And in his 7th season with the Arizona Cardinals, he would go on to start all 14 games for a team that would end up going 11-5, or that would end up going 11-5, and Bruce Arians' 2nd season as coach. This is the year where he won Coach of the Year, by the way. Calais Campbell would be named a Pro Bowler for the first time in his NFL career. He finished with 58 tackles on the season, 16 tackles for loss, which at that point would be the most he ever put together. He also finished with 7 sacks, just 2 sacks less than what he did the previous season. Not to mention, he also caught his 2nd interception of his career, defended 3 passes, and he also forced a fumble. At the conclusion of the 2014 season, many people were starting to recognize Calais Campbell as one of the better defensive ends in all football, especially. And this is also the year where Bruce Arians would go on to be named the Coach of the Year after putting together an 11-5 season. But at the end of it all, they would end up losing in the wild card round to the Carolina Panthers, as it would be a 27-16 loss. But following this season, many people started to know who Calais Campbell was, and going into his 8th season with the Arizona Cardinals, his age 29 season, he would start all 16 games for an Arizona Cardinals team that would make the playoffs with a 13-3 record, the best record that they have with Calais Campbell on the team. In 2015, he would go on to be named a Pro Bowler for the 2nd year in a row as he finished with 61 tackles. He had 16 tackles for loss for the 2nd year in a row. He would finish with 5 sacks on the year, as well as finishing with the fumble recovery and 3 passes defended. And once they made the playoffs following Calais Campbell's 2nd season as a Pro Bowler, not to mention that, this was his 2nd season as a Pro Bowler. Once they made the playoffs, they would end up beating the Packers in the divisional round before losing to the Panthers in the championship round, before the Panthers ended up being beaten by the Denver Broncos, I believe, in the Super Bowl. Just to give a sense of what that season was looking like, that was when Peyton Manning won his most recent one. But following that season, that would lead Calais Campbell into his age 30 season, his 9th and final season with the Arizona Cardinals. In that season, he would start all 16 games he would play for an Arizona Cardinals team that finished 7-8-1. Calais Campbell would miss the Pro Bowl for the first time since 2013 as he finished with 53 tackles on the season. He had 12 tackles for loss, 4 less than what he had put up the previous 2 seasons. He would go on to finish with an interception, his 2nd of his career. He had 6 passes defended. He forced a couple fumbles and recovered 3. And he also finished with his first ever fumble recovery touchdown of his NFL career. And pretty much because the Cardinals weren't a contending team, Calais Campbell would not be named a Pro Bowler. Following his 2016 season, he would eventually get moved to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And for the Jaguars, they signed him for a 4-year, $60 million deal. And once he went there, his very first season of playing for the Jaguars in 2017, following his season with the Arizona Cardinals, in which he didn't make the Pro Bowl and was named 2nd team All-Pro for what would be the 2nd time in his NBA career, or his NFL career. Calais Campbell was named to the first team All-NFL for his first team in Jacksonville for the only time in his career. He would start all 16 games for a Jacksonville Jaguars team that would eventually finish the season with a 10-6 record. They would make the playoff. They would win the AFC South for the first time. They would win their division for the first time since 1999, and they would go on to make the playoffs for the first time as a team since 2007, and Calais Campbell was a big part of that. In his first team all-defensive season, he would finish with 67 tackles on the season. Up until that point, that's the second most tackles he ever put together in a season. He had 14 tackles for loss, tied for his third best season at that point. He would go on to finish with 3 passes defended. He had 3 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery as well. Also, he would go on to finish with a fumble recovery touchdown, and he would go on to finish with 14 and a half sacks, the most sacks that Calais Campbell has ever put together in an NFL season in his career. He will be named a Pro Bowler as well for the 3rd time in a 4-year span. And once the Jaguars made the playoffs, they would end up beating the Bills in the first round 10-3. They beat the Steelers by 3 in the divisional round before losing in the AFC Championship game to the Patriots, before the Patriots ended up losing to the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl. And then since, he has not made the playoffs with the Jaguars. In his second season with Jacksonville in 2018, in his age 32 season, he would start all 16 games for a Jaguars team that would go on to finish with a 5-11 record under Doug Marrone's second season. In that season, Calais Campbell would finish with 72 tackles. That would be tied with the 2011 season for the most tackles he's ever put together in a year. He put together 20 tackles for loss, which is the most tackles for loss he'd ever put together in a season. He would go on to finish with 2 passes defensed. He finished with a forced fumble and a fumble recovery, as he finished with 10 and a half sacks. The second and the most recent time in his NFL career, he's finished with at least 10 sacks in a season. Following that season, like I said, he was named a Pro Bowler for what would be his second season in Jacksonville, his second season in a 4-year stretch as well. And like I said, they did miss the playoffs, so many people were continuing to recognize Calais Campbell as one of the best defenders in football. Following that season, he will come back for his 3rd season in Jacksonville, his age 33 season. In his age 33 season, he would end up playing all 16 games for a Jacksonville Jaguars squad that would finish 6-10. They had one more win than the year before. In 2019, because of his amazing play on the field and off, Calais Campbell was awarded the Walter Payton Man of the Year in 2019. If many people are, this was the last full season before COVID seriously hit. But in the 2019 season, Calais Campbell was named a Pro Bowler for the 5th time in a 6-season stretch. The 3rd, and thus far, he was 3 for 3 in Jacksonville Jaguar seasons with making the Pro Bowl. He will go on to finish with 56 tackles on the season, the least amount of tackles he's had since he was on the Arizona Cardinals. He finished with 10 tackles for loss, the least amount of tackles for loss he's had in a season since 2009, his first season as a starter for the Arizona Cardinals. He finished with 6.5 tackles on the season. He would go on. This is the least amount of sacks he'd have in a season since 2015. The last time he was a Pro Bowler with the Cardinals. He would also go on to finish with 2 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery. He also took home his 3rd fumble recovery touchdown of his NFL career. He would also, and then at the end of that season, the Jaguars would not make the playoffs. And then at the conclusion of the 2019 season, the Jaguars would actually trade Calais Campbell to the Baltimore Ravens for a 2025th round pick that was originally from the Atlanta Falcons. But once Calais Campbell got there to the Ravens, I think he signed another deal. In this most recent 2020 NFL season, a season that many are aware was impacted by COVID to the point where there were no fans in the stands, but every player was still there. But the teams were still allowed to play their full 16-game seasons, but of course this time with a lot more testing. In the 2020 season with his new Baltimore Ravens team, Calais Campbell would start all 12 of the games that he would play in a season where the Baltimore Ravens finished with an 11-5 record, and they would go on to make the playoffs. In this most recent season with Baltimore and the 12 games he played, he finished with 28 tackles. That's the least amount of tackles he's ever put together in a season. He also put together 4 sacks. the least amount of sacks he's put together since his rookie season. That's the least, that wasn't 0. He had 5 tackles for loss, not to mention that he also defended 6 passes. At the conclusion of the season, he was named a Pro Bowler for the 4th consecutive year, and he was named a Pro Bowler for the 6th year in 7 seasons. The year that he wasn't named a Pro Bowler, he was named to the 2nd team All-Pro. So that should give a sense to the kind of player that he is. And then once the Ravens made the playoffs, they beat the Titans in the first round before losing to the Bills by 2 touchdowns in the divisional round, before the Bills lost to the Chiefs, who lost to the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. But that basically sums up what Calais' Campbell career is. It's been a steady ascent to where he is now. Over the last 7 seasons, he's either been a Pro Bowler or he's made the All-NFL team at his position, which should show how dominant he is. How well it just like, and of course it's not just because of his size and his weight, it's because he's actually able to use it incredibly well at a Pro Bowler's level. With that said, I want to first thank the pro and college football reference websites, along with the NFL and ESPN websites, for giving me what I needed, especially and some of the Wikipedia pages that I needed, because I wouldn't be able to do this episode without them. I want to thank everybody for listening to all 21 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well, because if you ever get a chance to watch Calais Campbell, you will get a chance to understand how dynamic of a player he is. And last but not least, I want to wish Calais Campbell a happy 35th birthday. I hope all is well. And hopefully by this time next year, by his 36th birthday, he'll do a lot in this upcoming NFL season that will give me a reason to not take him off the list. With that said, once again, today is Wednesday, September 1st, 2021. I'm James Sims. Once all of today's matchups and exhibitions are done, I will come back tomorrow on Thursday, September 2nd. But until then, I want to thank everyone for listening to this piece. I hope all is well, and hopefully I'm talking about Calais Campbell at this time next year. I'm James Sims. Today is Wednesday, September 1st, 2021. This is The Elite. Thank you for listening to my piece, and peace out.